The year 1914 dawned upon a Europe teeming with unresolved tensions and simmering rivalries. The continent was a cauldron of competing interests and historical grievances, each nation wary of the others. The great powers, each boasting empires that spanned the globe, eyed each other with a mixture of suspicion and disdain. Their colonial ambitions and economic interests often clashed, adding fuel to the fire of mutual distrust. The once mighty Ottoman Empire, now the sick man of Europe, was crumbling, creating a dangerous power vacuum in the Balkans. This decline not only destabilized the region, but also invited intervention from other powers eager to expand their influence. This region, a tinderbox of ethnic and religious tensions, became a focal point for the ambitions of Austria, Hungary and Russia, setting the stage for a confrontation that would have global consequences. The Balkans were a microcosm of the larger European struggle, where local conflicts could easily escalate into broader wars. Imagine a chessboard, its squares representing the nations of Europe. Each move was calculated, each decision weighed for its potential impact on the balance of power. Each nation, a player in a high-stakes game, maneuvering for advantage, seeking to outmaneuver its rivals. Diplomats and generals alike plotted their strategies, aware that a single misstep could lead to disaster. The pieces on this board, however, were not inanimate objects, but millions of lives, pawns in a game played by emperors, kings, and statesmen. The human cost of these political games was often overlooked in the pursuit of national glory. The stakes were high, the consequences of miscalculation potentially catastrophic. A single wrong move could plunge the entire continent into chaos and bloodshed. The rules of this game were complex, shaped by centuries of shifting alliances, dynastic ambitions, and the relentless pursuit of power. These historical forces created a tangled web of relationships that was difficult to navigate. Yet beneath the veneer of diplomacy and the intricate protocols of statecraft, a dangerous current of unrest stirred. The common people, driven by nationalist fervor and economic hardship, were growing increasingly restless. Nationalism, imperialism, and militarism, potent forces unleashed by the Industrial Revolution and the rise of mass politics, threatened to shatter the fragile peace that held Europe together. These ideologies fueled a sense of inevitable conflict as nations armed themselves for the coming storm. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne in Sarajevo on June 28, 1914, provided the spark that ignited this powder keg. This single act of violence was a flashpoint that set the entire continent ablaze. But the assassination was merely the trigger, the catalyst that set in motion a chain of events already set in place by decades of mounting tensions and miscalculations. The intricate web of alliances and enmities ensured that a local conflict would quickly spiral out of control. To understand how a single act of violence could plunge the world into the abyss of total war, we must delve deeper into the complex web of causes that made the First World War all but inevitable. These causes were deeply rooted in the political, economic, and social fabric of Europe, making the conflict a tragic inevitability. Nationalism, the potent ideology that binds people together based on shared language, culture, and history, has been a double-edged sword throughout modern history. It played a crucial role in setting the stage for World War I, a conflict that would reshape the world. While nationalism fostered a sense of unity within nation-states, it also bred intolerance and suspicion toward those perceived as different, often leading to internal and external conflicts. This was particularly true in the Balkans, a region long under the yoke of the Ottoman Empire, where the seeds of nationalism grew in the fertile ground of ethnic diversity and historical grievances. Various ethnic groups, each with their own dreams of independence and self-determination, clashed with the waning power of the Ottomans and with each other, creating a volatile mix. The Ottoman Empire, once a formidable power, had entered a long period of decline, losing its grip on the diverse populations it once controlled. This decline created a power vacuum in the Balkans, which various European powers, particularly Austria, Hungary and Russia, sought to fill, each with their own strategic interests. Russia, seeing itself as the protector of Slavic peoples, supported Serbian ambitions for a greater Serbia that would unite the South Slavs under its banner, further complicating the regional dynamics. Austria-Hungary, a sprawling empire composed of numerous ethnicities, viewed Serbian nationalism with alarm, fearing it would embolden its own restless Slavic populations and threaten the stability of the empire. This volatile mix of nationalism, imperial ambition, and ethnic tensions turned the Balkans into a powder keg, a region ripe for conflict and instability. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne by a Serbian nationalist in Sarajevo, provided the spark that ignited this powder keg, setting off a chain reaction. This event set in motion a chain of events that would lead to global war, drawing in nations from across the world into a devastating conflict. The assassination of the Archduke, a tragic event in its own right, became a rallying cry for nationalists on all sides, fueling the fires of conflict and division. In Austria-Hungary, it fueled anti-Serbian sentiment and demands for retribution, leading to a hardening of positions and a call to arms. In Serbia, it sparked defiance and a willingness to resist Austro-Hungarian pressure, further escalating the tensions between the two nations. Nationalism, once a force for unity within nation-states, had become a dangerous ideology, blinding people to the common humanity they shared and driving them toward the abyss of war, with devastating consequences for all involved. The decades leading up to World War I witnessed an unprecedented scramble for colonies, particularly in Africa and Asia. This period saw European powers racing to carve out territories, driven by a mix of economic, political, and cultural motivations. European powers, driven by a potent mix of economic ambition, national pride, and a belief in their own cultural superiority, competed fiercely for control of territories across the globe. They believed that expanding their empires would not only bring wealth, but also elevate their status on the world stage. This competition for colonies, known as imperialism, exacerbated tensions between the great powers, creating a climate of suspicion and rivalry that made war more likely. The presence of European military forces in these colonies often led to conflicts with local populations, further straining international relations. The quest for colonies was driven in part by the Industrial Revolution, which created an insatiable demand for raw materials and new markets for manufactured goods. Factories in Europe needed a constant supply of resources to keep up with production demands. European powers saw colonies as a source of raw materials, such as rubber, cotton, and minerals, that were essential for their industries. These materials were extracted and shipped back to Europe, fueling the industrial engines of the imperial powers. They also viewed colonies as captive markets for their manufactured goods, a place to sell their products without facing competition from other industrialized nations. This economic strategy ensured that European industries had a steady market for their goods. This competition for colonies often led to diplomatic crises and near wars. The scramble for territory was not just about land, but also about influence and power. The rivalry between Britain and France over control of the Nile River Valley almost led to war in the 1890s. This conflict, known as the Fashoda incident, was a clear example of how imperial ambitions could bring nations to the brink of war. Similarly, the rivalry between Germany and France over Morocco sparked two crises in the early 20th century, further poisoning relations between the two countries. These crises highlighted the fragile nature of international diplomacy during this period. The pursuit of empire had profound consequences for the international system. It reshaped global politics and created new power dynamics that would have lasting effects. It fueled an arms race as European powers sought to outdo each other in military might. Nations invested heavily in their armies and navies, preparing for potential conflicts. It created a web of alliances as nations sought to protect their interests and deter aggression. These alliances were meant to provide security, but also made the international system more complex and volatile. And it fostered a climate of suspicion and mistrust, making diplomacy more difficult and war more likely. The intricate web of alliances and the constant jockeying for power set the stage for the global conflict that would erupt in 1914.